we came up with the idea of doing a Zoom presentation to include storylines about everything that happened to us in the years that we were at the Academy. So what we've done is we've taken the critiques, our annual yearbook, and put together a PowerPoint presentation that Tom and I are going to narrate. And Chris Jacobson Brooks is going to go ahead and put that through the PowerPoint presentation with the assistance of Janet Ewing, whose dad was Father General Doug Ewing, who graduated in '47 from the Academy and was on the board of directors with us at the closure of the school. So what's going to happen is that Tom and I are going to read this storyline, and Chris is going to then interject pictures from that era as the dialogue goes along from beginning in 1954, when I came to the Academy with those cadets that were rinky-dinks and diaper alley kids, all the way up to our graduation. So Tom will do a portion of it, I'll do a portion of it. And one of the reasons we came to the museum is because this is our home. And there are so many things at the museum that if you do come to Chicago and come back to the Lake Geneva area or Geneva Lakes area, you'll be able to come and visit here at the museum. So two portions of this program in the dialogue that Tom and I are going to be reading. One will be coming from Pete Ryland's narrative of his class history that we first heard at the senior cruise over at the Shore Club on Lake Geneva. And then I'm going to be reading the narrative based upon the class reporters that belong to the logbook and to the guide on staff, and they wrote stories about us when they were freshmen, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So it's going to be kind of in two parts in the dialogue, and I think you're going to have some fun with it. All of this was written by you. Nothing has been written by Tom or I. It's been written by you, those that contributed to the guide on and the logbook, and I hope we have some fun with this. After we do the presentation, which will last about 20 to 22 minutes, then we're going to open it up for dialogue amongst ourselves. And in the conclusion of this evening, we're going to let you see a tour of the museum here. Hey, Chuck.
Hey, Chuck.
I'm going to have you see the tour of the museum and with Chris Jacobson Brooks and Janet Ewing as your narrator on the museum. So without further ado, let us begin. Today, we're going to open the old scrapbook and use it to illustrate our class history as written by Peter Ryland and the 1960 critique with comments from other class yearbooks and logbooks as reported by our class reporters that did belong to the yearbook staff. Tom is going to read the history, and again, I will do the comments beginning with 1955 to 1959 yearbooks. The history of the class of '60 began for some of us as seventh graders. On Sunday, September 19th, 1954, the first members of the class of 1960 arrived at Davidson Hall not knowing what to expect as our parents said goodbye and we became new cadet plebes at Northwestern Military and Naval Academy. A.G. Atwater, Dave Harmon, Joe Millis, Jay Nelson, and Bruce Peck were members of the seventh grade class assigned to Section 5, commonly referred to as Diaper Alley, the home of all seventh and eighth grade cadets. Wayne Sander, John Colburn, Fred Greer, and John McKinnon joined us for eighth grade. We became the original and immortal Rinky Dinks.
Let me introduce myself. I am the Spanish cannon that sits out in front of Davidson Hall. I have seen classes come and go ever since Northwestern was founded. Now it is commencement time again, and I am thinking back over the past 4 years. How well I remember the freshman class 4 years ago. It had everything from cowboys to beavers. They all had a funny feeling in the pit of their stomachs as their parents drove away, leaving them to the tender mercies of their company commanders, Wells and Visa, all except several old hands who had completed junior high at NMNA.
Remember the first day watermelon race and field events, and the junior high sports and activities throughout the year. Football, basketball, baseball, and field music.
Well, our freshman year of 1956-57 was a great year. By the grapevine, I heard that the boys really enjoyed military science that year with Sergeant Porter. They said his favorite saying was, "Sander, you get down and stand at attention in the round tounda." Then there was the night a certain party threw a bed cap into the main hallway, and the whole battalion had to stand at attention for 45 minutes. That also was the year that Ackerman started the weightlifting craze around NMNA, and McWanago Mike had pitching practice all winter in English 1. You made a pretty good catcher, didn't you, Sleepy Seth? Many a cadet went out of there with a white chalk marks of distinction, signifying a rude awakening. Commencement that year was an exciting one for the class of 60. For most of them, it was their first.
The outgoing seniors remember the freshman class having a very active year. Not all actions was constructive, but it was usually fun. Mike Darling really enjoyed reading ancient history in Egypt. Only trouble was that he flunked the test because he wrote them in hieroglyphics. Sharpie Tack is another fine example of a guy that went overboard for something. After he had scored a perfect bullseye on his hand, he was terribly disappointed that he couldn't do the manual of arms for a while. Freddie Greer showed a great interest in hiking. By now, everyone in school must have known that John McKinnon is the world's greatest caddy. But A.G. Atwater even let it slip they did shoot in the low 40s. When it comes to romantic interest, Chuck Rayfeld and Steve Sills walked off with class honors. We suppose they lost a strong competitor when the barbershop removed Lance Hedrick's Cupid doll curls. An interesting little club was organized at the school this year. Any freshman could join, but few cared to. Some of the character members are Bob Pouchon, Roger Blackman, Mike Parker, and Fitzgerald. The 50-Hour Club is his name. Did you ever remember Silent Sam Wenzel and Gabby Colburn for that nice spring rain that turned their room into an aquarium? Nicknames were plentiful around our class, such as Moose Sanders, Peanuts Hall, Elbow Niece, Beast Bassler. For inconceivable sayings were memorable, nominated Fish Spencer for his Scooby. For monotony of experience, we'll all remember Bill Miller and his constant choice. And finally, we went on to single 3 class members for unusual and memorable distinctions. Jim Lynn for being so devoted to his teddy bear, John M. Harrington for being the only John M. Harrington in the academy, and Seth Holloway for being the only seaman last class in the world.
Sophomore year, 1957 to 58. A few months later, a new school year had begun, and Bubbles was in the driver's seat. My, how he struck fear into the hearts of the wise fools and old at that first rep meeting. Speaking of wise fools, who can forget that coupled with tee-hee from that well-known course, Athletes of God. Somehow, time dragged a little that year. At permit time, there were usually several of the class of 60 sitting on my corroded barrel, anxiously awaiting their parents, and a few cherished hours in the civilized world outside. And how they enjoyed returning later to cavalcade before the cheering crowds in those comfortable blue grays.
The year began with the traditional field meets and watermelon race. Then it was time for classes to begin. English, social studies, and science, military science, and chapel.
At commencement, it broke the boys' hearts to see some of their beloved senior officers and friends go. Fellows like Knuckles Comic and Gentle Mike Hoff.
As written by our sophomore reporter, the class of 1960 is a class of character and characters. Our classmates are known for their many distinctions. Bill the Beak Wenzel's knows all, and likes to speak for the sophomore class. Mike Fitzgerald was earned the name Groaner because that's what he does every time somebody points to him. He took lessons from Grunter Greer. Keith Brenneman got so hungry that winter they chewed up the toboggan. For muscle-bound power, we have Atlas Bussey. One of the class wonders was Beanpole Bassler. And due to the members' revival of Corncob Roger Blackman, who just beat out gung-ho Harold Alt for the presidency of Club 75. Charles Fisher got straight A's in his original substitute for Spanish, the language of Fergie Artem. Bats Greenlick ran into a lot of things this year. Bunsey Peck won fame for his skill as choosing the days to go on sick call, while Teddy Bear Harmon easily qualified as Coach Annick's mascot. For eating prowess, we boast Charlie Chan Nelson, who can really down the sloppy chewy. Our class wonders are Shoulders Lundquist and Ice Pick, the human alarm clock. In class, we felt led by extra credit Niece and Fats Leach could not stop an extra piece of cake at 75 yards. Peter Ryan holds unique rank of PFCC, personal friend of the company commander. Chesty Rayfelt and Dumbo Sanders added more muscle power. Known as Warner, greatly reduced program, however, never produced a tangible results. Weed ran a poor third for the president of the Club 75. Cowbird Scow and Head Zielinski led the way in class, and yet with all these candidates, our class has one big setback. We think too much. Coach Clay, you don't think you know. Rack. You might remember Coach Clay's initiative and established a new sport at the academy during the sophomore year, wrestling. Sophomore grippers included Keithley, Fisher, Sills, Sanders, Bussey, Niece, and Ickman. Look for your classmates in frosh football, basketball, baseball, golf, tennis, and track, and even some of our varsity teams, football and baseball. Before we knew it, government inspection and commencements were here. Another year has come to a close.
Junior year, 1958 to 59. The next year it was onward and upwards with Flabby Cappy in command and a few more faces, new faces. Can you remember the day in September 1958 when you thought you saw a parent standing in the cadet ranks, only to find out later that it was a general by the name of Brightster? That year, as juniors, the class of 1960 climbed up the first rungs of the ladder of rank and responsibility. The cry went up. Next week, we'll have to get organized. And so they did. Steve Areno was elected class president at the memorable November meeting, with Major Lilich bestowing the coveted late lights privilege on the exalted ones. The class was proud of the dances it put on, especially the Jungle Paradise that grew up overnight in the old gym.
And eventually ended up at Colonel Jake's Lake Geneva front porch as decorations for Chrissy's 10th birthday party.
It was also the year of the founding of the Thespians, chemistry with Mr. McKay, and the great water shortage. And that brings to mind the big wing ding when the new gym was dedicated.
Oh, yeah.
Our class had several first stringers on the varsity football team. Speedy Spence Fisher, big tackler A.G. Atwater, tough lineman John Brigster, and Roger Blackman, to name a few. We've furnished our whole entire basketball team with cages like Ned Bassler, Mike Custer, Jay Nelson, and Ed Cole. We had big men in front of school activities as well, such as Mike Darling and JTAC Rifle, John Dunlap, John Colburn, Bill Kissel, and Carl Lundquist in Thespians, Terry Neese, Ray Marshaw, Tom Bussey in wrestling, Jay Nelson, Ned Bassler, Bill Wenzel, Dirk Scow in tennis, Bruce Peck and Steve Sills in publication, and quite a few debaters. As we look back, we can remember some red letter days when Harold Ault tried to find out how much magnesium powder it takes to blow up the chem lab. The day that Crash Holloway treed his father's car. The day that Bill Isaacs loaded the weapon for Bear. The time when John McKinnon and Bill Kissel made the hydrogen generator. The day that Dick Sauerwein didn't open the window. The day that Champ Rayfeld achieved a lifelong ambition of being OD. The day that Beaver Brenneman made those palm trees and didn't really eat them. The day that Mike Fitzgerald handled in his spelling notebook on time. The day that Peter Ryland didn't read his assignment. The day that Fred Greer didn't go for a walk. The day when John Harrington didn't listen to WBBM. The day that Wayne Sanders got stung by a bee and set a new shot put record. The time that Meatball Harmon led the cheers in kilts. The day that Bob Hine didn't have a date with Jill. And the day that Paul Schmidt finished the test on time. The day that Jack Moon played the bagpipes in tune. As the school year comes to a close, the class of 60 looks back on its great year. Everyone look back in sentimental ways on experiences, gripes, and fun we all had among themselves, in class and out, with our classmates and roommates.
At commencement 1959, our class scholars, Bill Wenzel, Dirk Scow, and Joe Millis, took some big honors. The class of 1960 kept seeing themselves getting up on the platform in another year, and the big question hovered in the back of everybody's mind. How will our class do next year? How will I do?
There's no doubt about it. We were a great class, and we had a great year. Just prove it. Look at the rank we got. More stripes than any junior class ever.
Senior year, 1959-1960. Well, it seems just like yesterday that I saw the class of 60 return last September for their biggest year. Shiny new buttons and stripes sprouted on their shoulders and sleeves, and they did their best to look menacing to the new boys and to the old ones they knew they would have to get in line. Our senior year started off a little wildly with a seagoing collision on Watermelon Day. But in the newly painted rooms and hallways of Davidson Hall, everything was soon shipshape. I don't have to tell you all the things that happened this year. Homecoming, Skipper and his abstract thinking, the advent of Quincy Grunchen, and the founding of the Student Congress.
Crack company, forensics and thespians, football, baseball, basketball, rifle, golf, tennis and Letterman banquet, and more Letterman. GI and the great goat cart race during Hell Week. Exams, field music, parades in Lake Geneva, senior cruise. We'll never forget them, and many others.
And now commencement 1960 is here, including competitions for trophies, Milria and the Chapin to A Company, Beals and Honor Company to B Company, the last parades, senior escort, awards, the graduation exercises, and the commencement ball all soon will be memories. As you leave here Sunday, members of the class of 1960, look around you at Davidson Hall and at your classmates, whom you will be seeing together probably for the last time. I will see the last of you leave, and then I will be alone again with my memories. Until another year, another entering class, another graduating class. I am the Spanish cannon that sits out in front of Davidson Hall. We salute you, class of 1960, until we meet again.
Over the past 60 years, we have lost classmates. They are gone but not forgotten.
Kenneth Dirk Brenneman.
Are all dead.
Edward Albert Cole.
John LeBoule Dunlap.
Frederick Anthony Greer.
John Martin Harrington.
William Washington III.
William George Kissel.
James Chappie LaRue.
John Milton Moon.
J. Frederick Nelson.
Richard Dale Sauerwein.
Rory John Vogt III.
John Barry Weed.
And we have lost contact with Galt, Roger Blackman, and John Colburn. Also gone but not forgotten, Davidson Hall. Northwestern merged with St. John's in 1995. Demolition occurred in July 2000. The ship's wheel was placed in the garden at the end of Shadow Lane Faculty Row for the 10th anniversary of the merger in 2005. Later, it was removed. Only the rock remains by the lakeshore path.
Oh, sure.
Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Jacobson Brooks, and I'm here at the Geneva Lake Museum at the Northwestern Military Naval Academy exhibit with Janet Ewing, the Director of Administrative Affairs.
Welcome to the museum. We're very happy to have you here for your 60th reunion and celebrating the class of 1960.
So, Janet, tell us how this exhibit came to be.
I've been at the museum for just about 5 years now, and one day we had a visitor come in, a man who asked where the exhibit was for the school that had been torn down. And I asked him, what school are you talking about? And he said Northwestern Military and Naval Academy. And it really struck a chord with me that we were missing something really big here at the museum regarding the Geneva Lake history. And so, just before that, I had met Chris Brooks quite by chance. We were both working for the Friends of Geneva Theater, and one day she came out to a meeting wearing a Northwestern military sweatshirt. And I said, "Where did you get that from?" And she said that my dad was a longtime headmaster there, Colonel Reverend Jacobson. Well, imagine my surprise, because this was my dad, Brigadier General Ewing, class of 47's headmaster. So that's how it all began, and I'm so thankful for her help. I think we were able to create a really great representation of the Academy.
Well, I think it's fabulous, and I would like to take all of you on a little tour of the exhibit.
I also want to thank everyone who donated items and artifacts for the exhibit. So here we go.
So if you came back to the Academy anytime after graduation in the 60s, you probably came along South Lakeshore Drive, and you saw this sign on either side of the driveway was donated by the class of 1961. So we're going to come off Lakeshore Drive, go down the hill, to the big neoclassical building, around the circular drive, and approach the entrance. We go through the columns and we see Davidson Hall. On either side of the entrance were the beautiful sconces that the museum, fortunately, was able to recreate and repair and have here on the side of the entrance. Also, we have from the rotunda the bronze statues that I'm sure many of you remember of the Olympic athletes that were modeled after ancient bronzes from the Roman era. So as we go into the exhibit, we'll go around and look at some of the artifacts that have been donated or collected. Starting with something else that was in the main rotunda, the Chapin Trophy. Maybe some of you rode those big cutter boats and vied for the Chapin Trophy by companies. Now, Mr. Chapin was very prominent in Lake Geneva. He had a home on the lake called Flowerside Farm, and he donated many things to the Academy. He also was quite a sailor, yachtsman, and created the Water Safety Patrol in the 1920s. I'm sure standing in the middle of the rotunda, as you looked east and west, you saw the murals that were above each company. So A company would have been off to the right, and this is the Potawatomi camp that was originally at Fontana, and then smaller camps were situated around the lake, and this one was actually on the Academy site. It was presented by the class of 1940. And if you look to your left, you would see the mural over the B Company staircase of the scene when the first white people to view Lake Geneva came in 1831. It was the Kinsey party from Chicago on their way to Portage to Fort Winnebago. And they met Chief Bigfoot, and if you walk the lakeshore path, you can see a rock there marking the exact spot where they camped and met the Potawatomi. These two murals were created by Louis Grell, and when the Academy was being built, Mr. Grell was contacted by some alumni to provide some illustration or mural or painting for the school. And he came up and he interviewed Colonel Davidson, and he was so impressed with the school and the mission and everything about Colonel Davidson and the Corps of Cadets that he actually donated both of these murals. So back to the rotunda, if we can turn around and see, remember what was over the fireplaces. We have this painting of Mount Vernon. I believe there was also one of Monticello that were painted by John Ross Key, the grandson of Francis Scott Key of Star Spangled Banner fame. So those were over the fireplaces. Another painting very dear and near to my heart is somebody you might recognize. There's Father Jacobson. See, he was my father, but he was also a father. In the rotunda were two other bronze plaques that honored President Washington and President Lincoln. Then if you went upstairs into the dormitory area, you probably remember having a desk and a wardrobe and of course no door. Everybody had curtains. We didn't want to be partial to either A company or B company, so we used the Davidson tartan for our curtain in the dormitory. We've got a collection of yearbooks, not all of them, but maybe you could look through your bookshelves and see if you have one that the museum doesn't have, and maybe call Janet and see if she needs one. We accept donations, but not duplicates. So we kind of have to know what it is you might want to donate and make sure that we can put it on display because we don't have one like it. And above the desk we have the diploma for Frank Schwinn, and his relative is chairman of the board here at the museum. So he donated his relative's diploma. In the wardrobe, we've got all kinds of things. Of course, a lot of athletic equipment, football jersey. Don't know who number 5 was, maybe you can claim that. And I don't know, those shoes look like they might need a spit shine. What do you think? Leather jackets, uniforms, and maybe if Janet can speak from behind the camera, she can tell the story of this letter sweater.
This is in very beautiful condition, and it is from the class of 1946.
That's great. We also have the Eisenhower jacket that was everyday wear for classes and during the week, but not the formal parades. And below the jacket, you can see we have all kinds of artifacts, small ones, larger ones, photographs, medals, and we just invite you to come and see it in person so you can take your time and remember all of these great things. We're going to close our tour of the exhibit with stained glass windows that were in the chapel. And of course, they were after your time. But in 1989, one of the cadets designed the school crest and the Episcopal church symbol for the little chapel of Christ the King in the main hallway. So please come if you're in the area and visit the Northwestern Military Naval Academy exhibit at the Geneva Lake Museum. Maybe you'll hear some bagpipes, because we have a piper dressed in Davidson tartan, and he can pipe us out.